This is crazy, really crazy. But when I see this 10 kilometers deep, 6.21 miles, it is a red flag and a marker for a possibility that we're looking at some kind of scalar weapon, some kind of tectonic weapon, i.e. a ionospheric heater. Now, we all point at the one up in Alaska, HAARP. However, you know, Australia, they have their own ionospheric heaters out in Western Australia near the Pine Gap military base, which is the US Australian military base out there. Highly secretive place. It doesn't have to be man-made, but when I see 10 kilometers deep, we have to factor in HAARP and man-made earthquakes.
this is how they're going to do the transhumanism. This is it. And they're going to do it straight down to our genetic level. They had to get the heavy metals into us and the microprocessors and sensors. They've released billions and billions and billions of sensors into the atmosphere. This has to do with AI, it has to do with synthetic biology, chemtrails, and GMOs. They're all delivery systems. They want those nanobots in our bodies because these nanobots are wired for a wireless world and can be remotely triggered. To me, that's the key to the vaccinations as well. The DNA of this cross-domain bacteria that some people name Morgellons. That's only one of the genetically engineered biological operations going on that will be somehow connected to the barium in the air that is highly conductive and great for optics, connected to being able to remotely mind control people as those nanoparticulates go beyond the blood-brain barrier and are ready to broadcast and receive in the brain and can be even programmed remotely to go to certain parts of the brain so that certain parts can be taken over remotely.
So what is the space fence?
It is about surveillance beyond comprehension, all the way down to the DNA. And the surveillance is not, don't think satellites and things up in the sky. Think your cell towers and the Gwen towers and the NexRads across the nation. And now think of the little heavy metals inside your bloodstream that are turning your entire body into, it's always been an electric tower, our bodies. Our bodies are transmitters and receivers. But now, with the heavy metals in there that are highly conductive, and living in a wireless environment with masses of waves moving through us all the time, even in remote areas, we have to think that this is part of the surveillance system. These are the little towers inside us that will give complete control, not only over our body, but over our brains. And this is what they're heading toward. The space fence is very much connected to transhumanism and the so-called singularity that they believe is coming. The utilization of these sounding rockets going up, and spewing masses of aluminum oxide over all the populations below and in the lower atmosphere, in the troposphere, and going up into the stratosphere and spewing it up there as well. And finally, whatever is being spewed gets high above us, and this very definitely is part of the space fence, and it is then taken over by centrifugal force and will make a ring around the planet, just like Saturn has, just like Saturn. And that ring will be highly conductive. And in between, sandwiched between that ring of conductivity in space and now down in our atmosphere that has been totally ionized by the ionospheric heaters and radar, radio frequency, whatever, sandwiched between those two realms is us. And what they needed was Bernard Eastland's HARP, the patent that would give them the keys to the kingdom by making the lower atmosphere electrical and turning it into an antenna or a battery. And that was what the HARP experiments were primarily looking at. That is the name of the game. It's all about class. It's all about genetic bloodlines. And they are ready to do the lockdown. And that's how I look at the space fence, is we're in a planetary lockdown. Vaccinations will soon be required of all adults as well as children. You'll go to prison if you don't. This is locked in with transhumanism, locked in with elite globalization, because they can pulse certain frequencies and they can stack those frequencies. I think they used it in Ferguson, Missouri during that racial episode we had. I suddenly saw the crowd absolutely change. And so you can pulse a frequency for anger. You can pulse a frequency for violence. You can pulse a frequency for I don't care.
Can you see on my laptop these like bacteria with the little tails?
Yes, I sure can.
Yeah, I've been seeing that way too much. It's scary how Northern California, Florida, I've picked up a few cases now in California. I've never seen it before, and I'm seeing it in the last year and a half. Many of them have a chronic cough. Sometimes they'll tell me 1, 2, 3 years, and it just doesn't give up. It's just chronic cough. So some of it seems to settle in the lungs. In 40 years of looking at live blood, it's probably my first time I've seen it particularly prevalent in the last year and a half. These are moving with a flagella, a tail. They are moving under their own volition. Oh, look at them, they're all over. Okay, now they seem to hide under red cells, and then they come out in patches. And realize that each red blood cell, there's 1 million red blood cells in a drop of blood. So that means every drop of her blood is infected.
Die Euro-Krise ist aber, und das ist entscheidend, nicht ein europäisches Problem, sondern wir müssen darüber hinaus sehen, in den großen Zusammenhang des vom Dollar beherrschten Weltsystems. Alle Währungen der Welt orientieren sich am Dollar. Das heißt aber auch, wer den Dollar beherrscht, beherrscht das Weltgeldsystem. Dabei ist wichtig zu wissen, dass die Federal Reserve Bank eine Privatbank ist und insofern keinen Kontrollen seit 1971 mehr unterliegt, auch keiner Bindung an Gold. Die können drucken, was das Zeug hält, und damit schaffen sie Geld für ihre Eigentümer. Sie haben die Welt gezwungen, diese Leitwährung der Welt als Zahlungsmittel anzuerkennen. Und wer das nicht anerkannte, wurde von heute auf morgen zum Terroristen erklärt und wurde erledigt. Das heißt, hier die Dollarherrschaft geht so lange gut, wie nicht andere Alternativen im Markt auftauchen oder den Dollar schwächen. Und meine Damen und Herren, der Euro war dabei, die Bonität des Dollar in Frage zu stellen oder sogar zu übernehmen. Also musste der Euro kriseln. Will man eine Überschuldung lösen, gibt es nur zwei Wege. Entweder die Schulden werden abgebaut, also die Geldmenge wieder reduziert, oder die Geldwerte müssen entsprechend der gewachsenen Geldmenge angehoben werden. Das eine wäre Rezession, das andere Inflation. Rezession will keiner. Die Amerikaner haben gesagt für sich, besser Inflation als Rezession, und sie drucken wie die Wilden wieder gegen die Rezession an. Fragt man sich, wem letztlich die immer höheren Rettungsschirme, die Schulden- und Haftungsunion in Europa sowie die Verzögerungen jeder echten Lösung nützen? So sind dies jedenfalls nicht die überschuldeten Länder wie Griechenland, Portugal und so weiter, denn deren Schulden werden durch alle Maßnahmen jetzt, ich sage nicht Lösungen, durch alle Maßnahmen nicht getilgt, sondern nur erhöht. Und eine Lösung kann eigentlich nur ein Schuldenschnitt, ein Austritt aus dem Euro und ein Staatsbankrott sein. Was jetzt von dieser Euro-Clique vereinbart ist, ist keine Lösung, sondern ist nur eine Zeitverzögerung. Immer war das Problem der Schulden und der Kredite ein Problem zwischen Gläubiger und Schuldner. Wenn der Schuldner nicht mehr konnte, war der Gläubiger der Dumme. In diesem Falle sollen die Gläubiger nicht die Dummen sein, sondern sollen die europäischen Bürger der Dumme sein. Das muss einen Grund haben. Das sind die Interessen des Dollarimperiums. Die US-Finanzindustrie ist nämlich der Hauptgläubiger der Europaschulden. Und deshalb, weil sie die Macht haben, die Dollarherrschaft haben, darf es keine private Beteiligung, nennt Frau Merkel das so nett, darf es keine Gläubigerbeteiligung am Schuldenschnitt haben. Das heißt, alle versuchen, die Schulden aufrechtzuerhalten, um den amerikanischen Banken die Schulden zu ersparen. Wie kommen wir dazu? Gläubiger, die leichtsinnig Kredite vergeben haben, vor ihrem Verlust zu schützen. Die amerikanische Finanzindustrie, die Dollarherrschaft ist durch die Euro-Krise, dadurch, dass die Schulden bei ihr hängen und sie die Gläubigerposition haben und dadurch, dass die europäischen Banken noch versichert sind, doppelt betroffen. Und insofern ist das Interesse der USA, dass niemand hier Konkurs erklärt, sondern dass Zeit gewonnen wird. Es ist deshalb auch kaum zufällig, dass immer bei neuen Vertrauensverlusten und bei einem Absacken des Dollar neue Euro-Krisen von den Ratinggesellschaften befeuert wurden, wo die Ratinggesellschaften übrigens in der eigenen Hand der Gläubigerbanken stehen. Aber ganz wichtig scheint mir, dass die USA schon zweimal Verschuldungskrisen und Rezessionen durch die beiden Weltkriege zum größten wirtschaftlichen Aufstieg ihrer Geschichte umgedreht haben. Sie sind aus den beiden größten Krisen zum größten Wohlstand gekommen. Je stärker also die Finanz- und Realkrise auch jetzt für die USA selbst wird, desto größer wird die Versuchung, dass US-Finanzindustrie, Öllobby und Militär und Neokons wieder einen Krieg zur Ablenkung aus ihrer Verschuldungs- und Finanzkrise sowie als Lösung ihrer Rezession anzetteln.
American banking systemically dangerous institutions like the Morgans, the Citis, the B of A's, the Goldmans, and the Morgan Stanleys. These are institutions that ultimately report to the Federal Reserve, and these are the institutions that are chosen to enforce or perpetuate the US dollar as the world's reserve currency. And we live in a US dollar-centric system, or have up until very recently, when a lot of bilateral trade agreements have been struck between the Chinese, the Indians, the Russians, the Brazilians, where they are making arrangements and are building facilities where they can transact directly in their currencies as opposed to the dollar. And in a world where foreign central banks hold trillions of dollars in their reserve accounts, this becomes problematic when countries that have reserves are suddenly not doing business in dollars, because what it does is it undermines the rationale or the reason for them to actually hold dollars. And when they sell their dollars, or if they sell their dollars, the dollars return home. And that can be and will become very, very inflationary in nature, and likely will cause problems in the future. If Deutsche Bank is truly as financially sick as pundits claim, because much of this argument that they're in trouble rests on the size and on the makeup of their derivatives book. JP Morgan's derivatives book probably much bigger than Deutsche Bank's, because Deutsche Bank has been trimming theirs back dramatically over the last 2 years. If Deutsche Bank is sick from their derivatives book, by extension, it means that Morgan is sick, Citi is sick, B of A is sick, and Goldman is sick, and so is Morgan Stanley, because they all have the same stuff in their derivatives books.
Do you think they'll let Deutsche Bank collapse if it's that bad off, or do you think the German government will bail them out, or do you think they will bail in, or do you think maybe they'll find an investor to fund the bank for a little while longer?
Well, the way I view it is that if the globalists have determined that the financial system or the financial edifice is not robust enough to continue in its current form, they may very well initiate a collapse of Deutsche Bank, and this way they can blame the Germans. That is sort of a recurring thing with the globalists. I mean, the Second World War was blamed on the Germans. The First World War was blamed on the Germans, which brought on the reparations, which set the stage for the Second World War. And now here we are. We've got a German bank being effectively demonized in the Western press, and I would say the reality of what's occurring with Deutsche Bank is they're being brought to heel. And the reason this doesn't happen to the American banks is that the Federal Reserve views the American banks as the muscle to perpetuate the dollar. The globalists are very, very ruthless in using these calamities as to achieve greater and bigger things. So yeah, would I put it past them to collapse Deutsche Bank, as a scapegoat, and to try and hopefully, create a pile of ashes that they can, then resurrect something new, more to their liking from the carnage. Quite possible, but at the end of the day, my worldview is that we are approaching a time where we're going to get a global reset in our financial system anyway, and they may just use this as the trigger to initiate such a thing.
kind of provocation against China has been almost I wouldn't say a sideshow, but it's another chapter. The first chapter, of course, is the provocation of Russia. And that is probably the most dangerous. Does anyone in the United States know what the Russians are thinking, what people in Russia are thinking, that they're having civil drill exercises, what the Russian press are saying, what people think about this? There is a sense in much of Russia that the United States is about to attack them. This is very, very dangerous because it puts a country in a defensive position. And that's when accidents can happen. There is no debate about this in what is it constitutionally the freest press in the world? In the United States? Nothing. Read the New York Times of the last couple of days, that it's become a sort of Cold War propaganda sheet. Stories that are clearly nonsense. Putin is the one. He's one of those who's always talking about being a partner of the United States. He does want to be a partner. He sees Russia's future in Europe.
The US Secretary of State, John Kerry, called you Adolf Hitler and Saddam Hussein in the same breath. Does it bother you?
No, because they don't have credibility. The West always try to personalize things, and just to avoid the real problem, which is about deposing government and getting rid of certain president, just to bring puppets to suit their agenda.
This young boy has become the symbol of the war. I think you know this picture?
Of course I saw it.
His name is Omran, 5 years old, covered with blood, scared, traumatized.
I wanted to go back after my interview and go to the internet to see the same picture of the same child with his sister. Both were rescued by what they call them in the West white helmets, which is a facelift of al-Nusra in Aleppo. They were rescued twice, each one in different incident, and just as part of the publicity of those white helmets. None of these incidents were true. You can have it manipulated, and it is manipulated. We have real pictures of children being harmed, but this one in specific is a forged one.
But it's true that innocent civilians are dying in Aleppo.
Of course, not only in Aleppo, in Syria. But now we are talking about in Aleppo because the whole hysteria in the West about Aleppo, for one reason, not because Aleppo is under siege, because Aleppo has been under siege for the last 4 years by the terrorists. And we haven't heard a question by Western journalists about what's happening in Aleppo that time. And we haven't heard a single statement by Western official regarding the children of Aleppo. Now they are talking about Aleppo recently just because the terrorists are in bad shape. This is the only reason, because the Syrian army are making advancement, and the Western country, mainly the United States and its allies like UK and France, feeling that they are losing the last scars of terrorism in Syria, and the main bastion of that terrorism today is Aleppo.
Russia is on your side. What does it mean for you?
No, it's not on my side. It's on the international law side. It's on the other side, which is opposite to the terrorist sides. This is the position of Russia, because they wanted to make sure that the international law prevails, not the Western agenda in toppling every government that doesn't fit with their agendas. They wanted to make sure that the terrorism doesn't prevail in that area that would affect negatively the Russians themselves, Russia itself as a country, and Europe and the rest of the world. That's what it means for Russia to stand beside the legitimate Syrian government and the Syrian people.
We can see right now that Russia and Syria, they are ready to remove the Islamic State from that country and get rid of all terrorists. This is why Russia is building up their military presence in the Mediterranean. They're bringing in military assets because the United States at this point has three options. One, tell the truth, tell everyone what has happened here, and let the economy fail. And of course, when that happens, people will get rid of the government, they will get rid of the central bank. So we know that option is really not going to happen. The second option, leave Syria, leave the Middle East, let the entire economy collapse with no war. Again, people are going to point the fingers at the central bank, at the US government, because they've been lying to us all this time, telling us that we're in recovery. How would they explain it? The third option, begin a war. Go full force to cover up the economic collapse. And we can see right now that if Russia and Syria remove the terrorists from Syria, there is no reason for the United States to be in Syria. When this happens, the entire system will start to unravel. And this is why I think at this point, the U.S. is going to pick the third option. And when I say the U.S., I'm talking about the central banks, the neocons. Now, it all depends on this election of when it's going to happen. I think it's going to happen no matter what. But the time frame is going to be adjusted depending on who wins. So all of this that we see happening around the world, it's all interconnected. They're not going to just give up their system. They love the power. They love the control. And this is why we're going to see an event of all events occur. I mean, we're getting closer and closer to that point. You know they're going to be pulling the trigger. You know they have to, because they have no way out of this. And this is why at this point, the people have to come together and start to realize what is happening. We can't wait until it's too late.
in 2014, Michael J. Glennon, who is an insider, who was a legal counsel to the Senate Committee on Foreign Relations, so he's a very connected guy, and he wrote a book called National Security and Double Government. Here's the headline from Boston Globe regarding his book, written in 2014, by the way. Vote all you want, the secret government won't change. So he notes that, voters chose Barack Obama in 2008 for hope and change. He ran on basically a civil liberties platform, that he would shut down all those bad, evil things that George Bush did, like spying on Americans. And then he notes that everybody 6 years in, at the point of this Boston Globe interview, 6 years in, everybody was like, wait, it's completely the same thing as George Bush's administration. In fact, the drone war escalated. Guantanamo Bay was not shut down. The NSA spying became more aggressive. So he says, why did the face in the Oval Office change, but the policies remain the same? Obama could not have changed policies even if he tried, because, he says, of the double government. There's a government that you choose. He says there's the one we elect, and then there's the one behind it. Elected officials end up serving as a mere cover, he says, for the real decisions made by the bureaucracy. So this bread and circuses of the election every 4 years is, just bread and circuses. It's our modern day where we think we have any play in the outcome, and he's saying we don't. What he says when asked how to change the system, he said the ultimate problem is the pervasive political ignorance on the part of the American people, and indifference to the threat that is emerging from these concealed institutions. That is where the energy for reform has to come from, the American people, not from government. Government is very much the problem here. The people have to take the bull by the horns, and that's a very difficult thing to do because the ignorance is in many ways rational. There is very little profit to be had in learning about and being active about problems that you cannot affect, policies that you can't change.
Your only real function in this society is to vote for them so that they can justify their existence and create the illusion of democracy when they actually run totalitarian regimes that function based on coercion, propaganda, and manipulation of public sentiment. In other words, most citizens are seen by those in power as, quote, useful idiots. You are useful only to the extent that you vote for them to maintain power, and they prevent you from rising up by giving you the illusion that you have a choice in the future of the country, that you have some kind of influence through your vote, when in reality you don't have any influence at all. The entire system is theater. It's designed to keep your mind occupied and to make you think that you don't need to rise up because you falsely believe that you live in a free society, a democracy, when in reality you are living in a totalitarian police state regime who are deliberately engaged in social engineering and large-scale brainwashing in order to control you into thinking that you have a choice when you really don't.
The accusation leveled, of course, at the Russian government is that Trump is their favored candidate. Trump is the one they want to see in the White House come November the 9th, and that Russia is manipulating the election, influencing it, manipulating even public opinion in order to match its own interests.
What's going on in the US is a hysteria, I can't call it any other name, regarding Russia's alleged attempts to influence the US presidential election. Indeed, the United States has a lot of real issues and problems, starting from its enormous sovereign debt and down to all the shootings and all the gun violence in that country. It would seem that the presidential candidates should be discussing these most relevant and acute issues and some others, but obviously they have nothing to offer the American public to calm them down, and it is easier for them to try and distract the public with all this talk of Russian spies and hackers and cyber crime and attempts to influence American politics. I would like to ask them and ask you, does anybody seriously believe that Russia could actually somehow influence the choice that the American people are to make? Do you consider the United States to be some kind of a banana republic? The US is a great nation. Correct me if I'm wrong.
You wrote about a subject you're very familiar with, and that has to do with the deep state. And that means where the real action is and who runs things in this country. You giving us your insight into what you think about the significance of our election. Here's one quote. The next president, much like the current president and his predecessors, will be little more than a figurehead, a puppet to entertain and distract the populace from what's really going on.
I'm telling you right now, voting is not going to change things. If you look at the debates, they're not talking about any of this. They're not saying, hey, I'm going to make sure that the American people have some input in this election. So we're not hearing any of that. And in my opinion, as I look at the two candidates who are not actually discussing what I would be key issues in this country, is it going to change anything? Remember, Obama ran on ending wars and things like that. He's the first president to set through 8 years of full war. Did he change anything? No. So it's a government run by people behind the scenes, and it's time to wake up and get behind these people out there, and let's stop all this division. They want us fighting. They want the Democrats fighting with the Republicans. Whoever, whatever group fighting. The people who run the government are the moneyed oligarchy, like I said. Yeah, if a president came forward and was really honest, he would say, I'm going to end that. I'm going to make transparency. I'm going to do away with the Federal Reserve. All those things need to be done away with if we're going to have freedom in America. But the point is, it's not going to happen, I'll go back and say it again, unless the American people start demanding it.
The thing is that being president of the United States, you don't have a lot of choices. You're the head of a big, big apparatus, and that apparatus is steered by Wall Street. So what the president actually has to do is he has to implement the measures that Wall Street wants implemented, and he has to sell them to the people as if they were in their own interest. So it's a job, it's like an acting job. It requires acting skills and a lot of cynicism. And I think Trump fulfills these requirements pretty well. So he promised the people a lot of things that he won't be able to keep. And also he said he's going to improve infrastructure. He's going to rebuild bridges and roads and so on. But how is he going to do that with a state debt that runs up to $20 trillion right now? After this short period of euphoria, we're going to see a big sobering up in America. And then I think we're going to see a period of social upheaval because people are going to be really disappointed.
One of the groups organising anti-Trump rallies is called Move On. It's calling for action and demonstrations against the president-elect nationwide. However, Move On apparently has ties to billionaire investor George Soros. There's a name to conjure with. That information came to light from the emails leaked by WikiLeaks from Hillary Clinton campaign chairman John Podesta. In the leaked emails, Soros is told about activists who need funding, with the Move On group highlighted.
He certainly operates from the shadows, in the shadows. His only legitimacy is his wallet, and his only concern is to create the kind of democracy that he can prop up and gain an interest from. So that's the kind of person who's behind this continuing protest.
This is what they've been trying to pull off. Nationwide riots. They'd have to disarm the nation. Obama has been working on this for years. Do you think they built these FEMA camps for no reason? No, they built it for situations just like this. Waiting for the riots, waiting to be able to just round you all up and put you in prison. But they're not going to do it yet. They're trying to get the Trump supporters out as well.
Podesta has always been a strong advocate for declassification of government files in general and UFO files in particular. These days, Podesta has the ear of another potential president. He's running the campaign for Hillary Clinton. And more recently, conspiracy theorists have suggested there are UFO secrets hidden in Mrs. Clinton's private emails. It comes with the territory. Lee Spiegel says several whistleblowers have surfaced over the years, including the late lunar astronaut Dr. Edgar Mitchell, who say that secrets are still being kept.
This topic is not taken seriously. It's basically a non-topic. So how is that so? Here's how. It requires an understanding of the relationship between most of the mainstream news media and global intelligence communities. So what that says, that doesn't mean that the CIA controlled everything, but that you have to understand the media acts in certain choke points. So for example, a UFO sighting might get local news coverage, but that doesn't mean that it gets covered on the wire services. That's a very different situation altogether. And skeptics will argue, well, this phenomenon's so big it would have been covered, but really what that betrays is a lack of understanding of how news media has been related to intelligence communities around the world for decades.
Hasta 80 ovnis se han visto en España. El gobierno lo confirma sacando a la luz los conocidos como Expediente OVNI. Sí, pueden creérselo, el Ministerio de Defensa los tiene registrados en más de 1.900 páginas. Documentos secretos que durante más de 50 años han permanecido ocultos y que ahora el gobierno desclasifica.
humans have extraordinary potential for goodness, but also an immense power to do harm. Any tool can be used to build or to destroy. That all depends on our motivation. Therefore, it is all the more important to foster an altruistic motivation rather than a selfish one. So now, we indeed are facing many challenges in our times. Those could be personal challenges. Our own mind can be our best friend or our worst enemy. There's also societal challenges, poverty in the midst of plenty, inequalities, conflict, injustice. And then there is a new challenges which we don't expect. 10,000 years ago, there was about 5 million human beings on Earth. Whatever they could do, the Earth's resilience will soon heal human activities. After the industrial and technological revolution, that's not the same anymore. We are now the major agent of impact on our Earth. We enter the Anthropocene, the era of human beings. So one of the main challenges of our times is to reconcile 3 time scale. The short term of the economy, the ups and downs of the stock market, the end of the year accounts. The mid-term of the quality of life. What is the quality every moment of our life and over 10 years and 20 years? And the long term of the environment. Now, for the last 10 years, I went around the world meeting economists, scientists, neuroscientists, environmentalists, philosophers, thinkers in the Himalayas, all over the place. This seems to me there's only one concept that can reconcile those 3 time scales. It is simply having more consideration for others. If you have more consideration for others, you will have a caring economics where finance is at the service of society and not society at the service of finances. If you have more consideration for others, you will make sure that you remedy to inequality, that you bring some kind of well-being within the society, in education, at the workplace. Otherwise, a nation that is the most powerful and the richest, everyone is miserable, what's the point? And if you have more consideration for others, you are not going to ransack that planet that we have. And at current rate, we don't have 3 planets to continue that way. So the question is, okay, altruism is the answer. It's not just a noble ideal, but can it be a real pragmatic solution? And first of all, does it exist? True altruism, or are we so selfish? So altruism does exist. So what is altruism? It's the wish, may others be happy and find the cause of happiness. If we want a more altruistic society, we need 2 things, individual change and societal change. So is individual change possible? 2,000 years of contemplative studies said yes, it is. Now, 15 years of collaboration with neuroscience and epigeneticists said yes, our brain changed when you train in altruism. Now, do we have to wait for an altruistic gene to be in the human race? That will take 50,000 years, too much for the environment. Fortunately, there is the evolution of culture. Cultures, as specialists have shown, change faster than genes. But on a more global level, what can we do? We need 3 things. Enhancing cooperation. Cooperative learning in the school instead of competitive learning. Unconditional cooperation within cooperation. We need sustainable harmony, not sustainable growth anymore. Sustainable harmony means now we reduce inequality, in the future we do more with less, and we continue to grow qualitatively, not quantitatively. The Homo economicus cannot deal with poverty in the midst of plenty, cannot deal with the problem of the common goods, of the atmosphere, of the ocean. We need a caring economics. We need local commitment, global responsibility. We need to extend altruism to the other 1.6 other species, sentient beings, are co-citizens in this world. And we need to dare altruism. So now, individual change and cultural change mutually fashion each other, and yes, we can achieve a more altruistic society.